3 inmates managed to escape from Alcatraz prison, and it is one of the most enduring crime mysteries in U.S. history.
For over 60 years, the truth behind the fate of the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris has puzzled the world. Even forensic experts did not have a definitive conclusion about the most controversial Alcatraz prison break. Now, in 2025, the mystery may have finally cracked wide open, thanks to the help of science and new pieces of evidence. Did they survive the mighty waters? Today, we shall hear a major update on one of the most unbelievable escapes in all prison history. Escapers, walking free and alive. The 1962 escape from Alcatraz has been one of America's most enduring mysteries. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin seemingly vanished into thin air after breaking out of the maximum security prison situated on an isolated island in San Francisco Bay. The U.S. Marshals Service, FBI, and countless amateur sleuths have all weighed in on what might have happened. Most official narratives concluded the men likely drowned. But this year, new research and modern technology are helping to shift that narrative, offering surprisingly credible evidence that survival might not just have been possible, it may have been probable. One of the most compelling breakthroughs came from scientists using advanced hydrodynamic modeling software, tools that simulate water movement, tides, and currents in the bay. Historically, authorities believed that the cold water temperatures, averaging 53 degrees Fahrenheit in June, and the strong tidal currents were simply too treacherous for the escapees to survive. But these new simulations, taking into account the exact time the men left the island, moon phases, and tide charts from that specific night, June 11, 1962, suggest a different story. The models indicate that if the men launched their raft within a particular 30 to 45-minute window, the outgoing tide would have actually worked in their favor, gently pulling them toward the marine headlands just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. These findings directly contradict decades of belief that the prisoners would have been swept out to sea. Instead, the simulation shows a plausible route that could have deposited them safely on the mainland, provided they paddled with some coordination. It's a subtle yet powerful shift in perspective. The idea that their escape plan didn't just maybe work, it actually could have been timed perfectly to exploit the environment, not fight against it. Wow, that's an interesting new insight. But the tide data is only part of the picture. Another major development has come through advancements in forensic material analysis. Investigators and historians have long been fascinated by the tools and materials the escapees used, from the makeshift raft crafted out of raincoats to the dummy heads made from plaster, soap, and real hair. Until recently, much of this had been examined through relatively basic means. But in 2025, new analytical techniques such as 3D scanning, chemical analysis of aged rubberized fabric, and structural stress testing have been applied to the few preserved artifacts and replicas. These modern tools revealed something surprising. The raincoat raft, long thought to be a crude and possibly leaky vessel, might have been far more seaworthy than previously believed. Seams showed evidence of meticulous construction, possibly even heat-sealing techniques that would have made the raft more water-resistant than early assessments suggested. Some forensic engineers even noted that the raft's design shared structural similarities with modern inflatable survival boats. It appears that these were not the desperate, haphazard tools of panicked fugitives. They were the calculated, cleverly built products of intelligent men with a clear plan. Even more compelling are new interviews with retired forensic investigators and new data from digitized FBI archives that were previously restricted or disorganized. Several documents and internal memos suggest that federal authorities had suspicions as early as the late 60s that at least one of the Anglin brothers might have made contact with family in Brazil. Though the evidence was circumstantial, mainly rumors, grainy photos, and unverifiable letters, it's now being re-examined using modern facial recognition software and linguistic forensics. Incredibly, one of the photographs long dismissed as a hoax A picture allegedly taken in Brazil in the 70s showing two men resembling the Anglins has been flagged by AI-driven facial matching as having a high probability of being authentic. Put together, all of this new data is creating a compelling reevaluation of the old story. The idea that the men drowned is no longer the most logical conclusion. Instead, the balance of probability is starting to tilt towards survival, an outcome that transforms the Alcatraz escape from a legendary mystery into a potentially successful and long-buried triumph of human ingenuity and grit. Of course, the mystery isn't completely solved. There's still no official confirmation, no living escapee coming forward, and no ironclad DNA match tying the Anglin brothers to any one location post-1962. But what the insights of 2025 have made clear is that we underestimated these men, and perhaps the power of patience, planning, and a little bit of luck on a cold June night. Did they drown? Did they make it to freedom? Or are they still out there, living under new identities? Let's explore all the major theories that have emerged over the years and see how each one holds up. What really happened that night? On the night of June 11, 1962, the trio slipped out of their cells in Alcatraz, America's most escape-proof prison, and disappeared into the cold, foggy waters of San Francisco Bay. What happened next has become one of the most talked-about mysteries in criminal lore. The official theory, put forth by the FBI shortly after the escape, is that the men drowned in the bay. Authorities at the time believed the combination of frigid water, strong currents, and a poorly made raft meant the trio never had a chance. Debris from the escape, including part of their makeshift raft and a paddle, was found on Angel Island, leading investigators to conclude the raft had likely fallen apart. Since no bodies were ever recovered, they argued the escapees must have drowned and been carried out to sea. While this explanation was widely accepted for decades, it left a lot of room for doubt, mainly because no conclusive physical evidence, like remains or personal belongings, ever turned up. Another widely discussed theory is that the men did, in fact, make it to land, possibly Angel Island or the Marin Headlands just across the bay. Modern computer models, including hydrodynamic simulations conducted as recently as 2025, suggest that if they launched their raft at the right time, the tide could have carried them safely to shore. One intriguing detail is that a car was reported stolen in the area around the time of the escape, fueling speculation that the trio made it to land and quickly fled inland. This theory makes a lot of sense. The escape was meticulously planned, and Morris and the Anglins were smart. They had studied tides and maps for months. It's not impossible that they timed their getaway perfectly. Then there's the South America theory, which is where things start to get really interesting. According to this idea, the escapees not only made it to shore, but eventually fled the country and started new lives in Brazil. The theory gained traction when the Anglin family came forward with several pieces of possible evidence. These included unsigned postcards, reported phone calls, and even a photograph taken in Brazil in the 70s showing two men who resemble the Anglin brothers. In 2018, a letter surfaced that was allegedly written by John Anglin, claiming all three men survived and that Morris died in 2005, with Clarence passing away in 2008. While authorities were unable to verify the letter's authenticity, it breathed new life into the escape mystery and gave some credibility to the idea that the men pulled it off and disappeared forever. Some theorists have a darker take. There's a belief that the escapees may have been killed after escaping, either by organized crime contacts or possibly even the government. The idea is that someone might have picked them up by boat as part of a prearranged plan, only to double-cross them. The reasoning here is partly fueled by how much of an embarrassment the escape was for the U.S. government. There are even rumors that federal agents covered up any evidence of a successful escape to avoid further scandal. It's a murky theory, with little hard evidence, but it continues to circulate among those who suspect there's more to the story than we've been told. Another idea is that they didn't flee the country at all, but instead chose to live quietly in the United States under new identities. Several alleged sightings of the Anglin brothers were reported over the years, including in Florida and Georgia. One particularly emotional claim came from the Anglin family, who said that the brothers visited their mother in disguise years after the escape, and continued sending her flowers every Mother's Day until her death. Though none of this has been officially confirmed, it's not entirely far-fetched. In the pre-digital age, it was much easier to change your identity, especially with help from a network of friends or family. If anyone could pull that off, it might have been these guys. There's also a middle ground theory that the men made it to land but didn't survive long afterward. In this version, the escape was successful in terms of breaking out of prison and crossing the bay. But once they got to shore, possibly injured, freezing, or exhausted, they perished before they could escape further. The terrain around the Marin Headlands and Angel Island is rough and wooded, and if they collapsed or got lost, their remains could have gone unnoticed. This theory explains the lack of bodies in the water, but still assumes their story ended in tragedy shortly after the escape. And finally, there's the most conspiratorial theory of them all, that the escape was an inside job, maybe even involving secret government programs. Some speculate that guards turned a blind eye or even helped the men escape. Others claim Frank Morris, who was known to be extremely intelligent, might have been recruited for some kind of covert government operation. The wildest versions of this theory imagine Morris and the Anglins working as spies or informants. While there's zero real evidence to back this up, it remains one of those fun, what-if possibilities that keeps the mystery alive. In the end, the 1962 Alcatraz escape continues to captivate because no one truly knows what happened. While the official version remains the most widely accepted by law enforcement, new technology, letters, and family claims have poked enough holes in the story to keep speculation alive. Whether the men died in the cold, survived and fled, or pulled off one of the greatest disappearances in modern history, their escape represents something uniquely fascinating: the possibility of freedom against impossible odds. What do you think? Are they buried in the foggy hills of Marin County, or sipping coffee on a porch somewhere in rural Brazil? Until concrete proof shows up, this mystery is still wide open, and that's exactly why we keep talking about it. Let's look back on the detailed prison's escapes of all time. If you haven't ever heard about it, this piece of history is worth your time. The SMART plan. As we go along, you might picture some scenes in the familiar films that you've already watched. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 inmates at the notorious Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary pulled off what remains one of the most daring and enigmatic prison escapes in history. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin vanished from the maximum security island prison in San Francisco Bay, leaving behind a trail of brilliant improvisation, unanswered questions, and a legacy that continues to intrigue criminologists, historians, and the public. The Alcatraz escape was not just a tale of physical escape from an inescapable prison, but also a testament to human ingenuity, perseverance, and mystery. It happened. It was real. Alcatraz was designed to be escape-proof. Opened in 1934, the prison housed some of America's most dangerous criminals. Its isolation, surrounded by the cold, treacherous waters of the San Francisco Bay, served as a natural deterrent. In its 29 years of operation, 36 inmates tried to escape in 14 attempts. Most were captured or killed. Officially, none succeeded. The trio behind the 1962 escape were not typical violent offenders. Frank Morris, born in 1926, was an intelligent man with an IQ reportedly around 133. He was a seasoned criminal with a record of prison escapes.
Frank Lee Morris. He was the mastermind behind the elaborate escape plan.
John and Clarence Anglin, born into a family of 13 children in Georgia, were known for their strong bond and teamwork. They had a long history of robbery and had served time in various prisons, often transferred due to repeated escape attempts. The three men had met previously in the Atlanta penitentiary and were eventually reunited at Alcatraz, which unknowingly sealed the beginning of the most famous prison break in U.S. history. A year in the making. The escape plan, meticulously executed, was born from months of preparation and covert collaboration. The brains of the operation, Frank Morris, was joined by the Anglin brothers and later Allen West, another inmate who helped prepare the escape but ultimately failed to get out in time. The group used crude tools, a homemade drill crafted from a vacuum cleaner motor and metal spoons stolen from the mess hall, to widen the ventilation ducts in their cells. Every night, they would chip away at the concrete walls behind their sinks, hiding the noise with music and concealing the holes with cardboard and paint. One of the most ingenious elements of their plan was the creation of realistic dummy heads, crafted from soap, toilet paper, and human hair gathered from the prison barber shop. These heads were placed on their pillows to fool the night guards during head count. Underneath the cell walls, the prisoners accessed a utility corridor and a network of unguarded service tunnels. Above the cell block, they assembled a makeshift raft and life vests using over 50 stolen raincoats. The materials were glued with a homemade adhesive derived from soap and used to construct a 14-foot rubber raft, complete with paddles made from wood and screws. They stored these materials in the rafters above the prison ceiling, accessed through the holes they had created. And then, the time has come to execute the long-designed plan. Did you know they had to make sure the tides were in their favor? Yes, it might have helped them survive instead of not making it. The night of the escape. After over 6 months of preparation, the meticulously orchestrated escape plan was finally put into motion on the night of Monday, June 11, 1962. Each participant was acutely aware that they were taking an enormous risk, not only of recapture, but of drowning in the icy, unpredictable waters of San Francisco Bay. The escapees had waited for a night with favorable tides and minimal moonlight, ensuring darkness would provide cover as they made their desperate bid for freedom. The 4 original conspirators, Frank Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin, and Allen West, had synchronized every detail in advance. But when the moment came, Allen West was unable to remove the grill in his cell. Unlike the others, West had secured the vent cover in place with concrete after rehearsing, to avoid detection during routine inspections. However, on the night of the escape, the concrete hardened more than expected, and he found himself frantically chipping at it for hours with no success. Trapped in his cell and knowing he had missed his opportunity, West eventually abandoned the attempt. Later, he cooperated with authorities and became a primary source of information on the plan. Meanwhile, Morris and the Anglin brothers proceeded with precision. After successfully removing the ventilation grates at the back of their cells, they squeezed through the openings one by one into the unguarded utility corridor, a narrow service space running behind the cell block. From there, they ascended a vertical ventilation shaft, climbing pipes and structural supports until they reached a rooftop hatch they had previously loosened. Once on the roof of the prison, they carefully navigated the complex architecture, taking great care to avoid detection by guards stationed in the towers. The route involved crossing a flat expanse of the roof before descending roughly 50 feet down a vent pipe on the exterior of the building. This brought them to the rear side of the prison, where they avoided the main gates and lights, ultimately reaching the ground. They then traversed a series of fences and an open yard, heading toward the northeastern shore of Alcatraz Island, a secluded area far from guard patrols. There, hidden behind rocks and dense brush, they had previously cached their escape tools and assembled materials. The inflatable raft and life vests, painstakingly constructed from over 50 rubber raincoats, stitched and sealed with heat from steam pipes in the prison's utility areas. For inflation, they used a concertina-style bellows, a modified musical instrument, reconfigured to blow air into the raft's chambers. At approximately 10:20 p.m., as the tide began to ebb and the chilly wind picked up, the 3 men launched the makeshift raft into the dark waters of San Francisco Bay. What happened next remains one of the greatest mysteries in American criminal history. Some believe they paddled north toward the Marin Headlands, possibly aiming for the area around Angel Island or Sausalito, where they might have blended into civilization. Others argue the current would have swept them out to sea, making survival unlikely. The escape was not discovered until the following morning, during the routine head count shortly after 7:00 a.m. A guard making rounds stopped at the cells of Morris and the Anglin brothers and was momentarily fooled by the dummy heads, which were positioned under the blankets and appeared to be sleeping. Clever, right? However, when one of the heads was nudged and rolled to the floor, revealing its lifeless, artificial nature, the deception was exposed. A full emergency lockdown of the prison was immediately ordered. Sirens blared across the island. Guards began a frantic search of the premises, and Alan West, still in his cell, was quickly identified as connected to the escape. Under questioning, West confessed his role and provided authorities with the details of the plan. A massive manhunt was launched. The FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, and Coast Guard were all mobilized. Helicopters and patrol boats scoured the surrounding waters. Search teams combed the shoreline of Angel Island, Tiburon, and Marin County for days, looking for any trace of the fugitives. The search initially turned up few leads. A few days later, some debris was recovered. A paddle, pieces of rubber material from the raft, and a life vest floating near Angel Island. But no conclusive evidence was found to prove whether the escapees had made it to shore or perished in the bay. The investigation that followed would become one of the most extensive in American penal history, remaining open for nearly 2 decades. Though the FBI officially closed the case in 1979, concluding the men had likely drowned, many, both inside law enforcement and among the public, remained unconvinced. The U.S. Marshals, who still technically consider the escapees fugitives, have kept the case open and active into the 21st century. Did they deserve freedom? It's important to remember that these men were not innocent in the eyes of the law. They were all convicted criminals who had been sentenced to lengthy prison terms for serious offenses. While their escape was a remarkable feat, their criminal records were far from clean, and their actions before and after the escape demonstrate their status as lawbreakers. Frank Morris, the mastermind behind the Alcatraz escape, had a long history of criminal activity prior to his incarceration at the infamous federal penitentiary. Morris was originally arrested for bank robbery, for which he received a 10-year sentence. His criminal activities included theft and armed robbery, both of which contributed to his reputation as a career criminal. His behavior in prison also demonstrated a clear pattern of defiance and lawlessness. Morris had previously attempted to escape from multiple institutions, a factor that led to his transfer to Alcatraz, which was known for housing the most dangerous and high-profile criminals. Morris's criminal record clearly paints a picture of someone who repeatedly broke the law, with his escape from Alcatraz simply being another chapter in his ongoing criminal activities. Similarly, the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, were also far from innocent. Like Morris, they had been convicted of serious crimes, including armed robbery and bank robbery. Before their arrival at Alcatraz, the brothers had been involved in various criminal activities, and their records included multiple escape attempts from other prisons. Their criminal pasts were marked by a willingness to take extreme risks to gain their freedom, often at the expense of the law. The Anglins, who were known for their close bond, had also been involved in several criminal endeavors together, making their escape a shared goal that they worked toward with precision and determination. They too were sentenced to Alcatraz, a high-security institution, because of their violent criminal behavior and history of attempting to break out of other prisons. While the 1962 escape from Alcatraz was a brilliant and daring act of ingenuity, it does not erase the fact that the 3 men were convicted criminals. Their escape was an illegal act, one that further demonstrated their willingness to flout the law and take extreme measures to gain freedom, even if it meant breaking the rules and taking life-threatening risks. In the eyes of the law, their actions were criminal, and they remained fugitives from justice for the remainder of their lives. if indeed they survived the escape attempt, as many believe. Their status as lawbreakers is an undeniable part of their story, no matter how much the public may romanticize their escape. However, the mystery surrounding their escape has led many to focus on their ingenuity and resourcefulness rather than their criminal actions. The way they meticulously planned and executed the escape, from creating lifelike dummies to craftily chiseling away at the walls of their cells, has led some to view them as symbols of cleverness and resilience, rather than mere criminals. The media, films, and books have helped to perpetuate this narrative, casting them as anti-heroes rather than as individuals who committed serious offenses. The mystery of whether they survived their escape, compounded by the fact that their bodies were never found, only fueled public fascination, making their escape a legend. Despite the allure of their escape, the men were not innocent. The cultural fascination with their cleverness and the mystery surrounding their potential survival may cause some to romanticize their story. But legally, they were convicted felons who had committed severe crimes before and after their escape attempt. Their criminal records and behavior underscore the fact that their escape was an act of lawlessness, not heroism. While they may have managed to outwit one of the most secure prisons in the United States, this does not change the fact that they were criminals who had broken the law numerous times before and after their attempt to flee Alcatraz. While the myth of their survival and the ingenuity of their escape has captured the imagination of many, it is essential to remember that the truth of their actions lies within the context of their criminal pasts and their defiance of the law. What began as a dramatic criminal event quickly evolved into a symbol of ingenuity, defiance, and the enduring allure of the American outlaw myth. The cultural impact of the escape. The escape challenged the authority and reputation of the American penal system at a time when Alcatraz stood as the ultimate symbol of unbreakable incarceration. Alcatraz had a reputation for being utterly inescapable due to its isolated location on a rocky island surrounded by the cold, shark-infested waters of San Francisco Bay. When Morris and the Anglin brothers successfully breached the prison's security, it shattered public confidence in the infallibility of federal law enforcement and sparked debates about prison conditions, surveillance, and rehabilitation versus punishment. Culturally, the 1962 escape tapped into a broader American fascination with underdog stories and rebellious heroes who outwit authority. The escapees, though convicted criminals, were soon mythologized in the media and popular culture. They became figures of fascination, clever, resourceful, and fearless, who had taken on a system designed to crush individual freedom and won, at least temporarily. The public's imagination was further fueled by the mystery of their fate. Despite extensive investigations, their bodies were never recovered, and no definitive evidence has confirmed whether they drowned or survived. This ambiguity added to the legend, transforming the event from a simple prison break into a compelling, unsolved mystery. The cultural impact of the escape was amplified by its portrayal in film and literature. The most notable example is the 1979 film Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood as Frank Morris. The film dramatized the event with suspense and grit, reinforcing the image of the escapees as clever anti-heroes rather than mere criminals. Eastwood's stoic portrayal helped cement the escape in the collective imagination as a story of determination and cunning. The film, along with numerous books, documentaries, and television specials, kept the narrative alive and introduced it to new generations, each one finding its own meaning in the tale. Be it resistance to oppressive systems, triumph of the human spirit, or simply an enthralling mystery. Beyond the media, the escape also impacted how Alcatraz itself was perceived. What was once a feared prison became a site of curiosity and reflection. After the prison closed in 1963, just 1 year after the escape, the island was transformed into a National Historic Site. The story of the 1962 escape became one of the central features of Alcatraz tours, drawing millions of visitors intrigued not only by the prison's notorious inmates, but also by the legendary escape. The The event added an element of myth and adventure to the site, helping to shift public interest from fear of criminals to fascination with their stories. Furthermore, the escape has had a lasting influence on prison reform discourse. While not directly responsible for major policy changes, the event contributed to the broader national conversation about the effectiveness of harsh, isolating prisons like Alcatraz. Its closure a year after the escape was due to high maintenance costs and changing penal philosophies, but the escape underscored the institution's vulnerabilities and growing obsolescence. The case indirectly highlighted the need for more humane and rehabilitative approaches in the correctional system. Even today, more than 6 decades later, the story continues to resonate because at its core, it speaks to a fundamental human fascination with escape, survival, and the possibility of triumph against impossible odds. More updates and new information will unfold in the coming months. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.